New York City, home to 400,000 undocumented immigrants, is on the brink of chaos. The government is preparing for the largest mass deportation in U.S. history, with military support and ICE raids looming. Families could be ripped apart overnight, businesses devastated, entire neighborhoods changed forever. The city is scrambling. Let's dive in. The Pentagon is already sending 1,500 active-duty troops to secure the southern border, a clear sign that the administration is taking immigration enforcement to an entirely new level. Officials have been tight-lipped about exact plans, but sources indicate that raids could start in cities like Chicago before moving to New York. The big question is, what will mass deportations look like on the ground? Will there be workplace raids, or will early morning arrests become the norm? Many undocumented immigrants, some of whom have lived in the U.S. for over a decade, are bracing for the worst. Families are preparing for sudden separations, with parents ensuring their children carry identification and emergency contact numbers at all times. Advocacy groups warn that schools, shelters, and even hospitals could become targets, escalating fear across immigrant communities. As uncertainty looms, the city is racing to find ways to shield its most vulnerable residents. New York City, home to over 400,000 undocumented immigrants, is on high alert. Advocates say they've seen this before. Under the previous Trump administration, early morning raids and workplace arrests were common tactics. Now, there are reports that similar strategies could return, only this time on a much larger scale. Imagine waking up one morning to find entire neighborhoods disrupted, families separated, and fear gripping entire communities. This isn't a distant possibility. It could be happening soon. Mayor Eric Adams has made it clear that while the city will not interfere with federal enforcement, it will also not actively assist in deportations. Under New York's sanctuary city laws, local agencies and law enforcement are restricted from cooperating with ICE unless a person has been convicted of a crime. But will that be enough? ICE has its own methods, and with federal backing, they don't necessarily need local authorities to carry out their operations. Immigration advocates warn that these raids won't just impact undocumented individuals. Many households include members with mixed immigration status, meaning that even U.S. citizens could see their families shattered overnight. Parents could be forced to choose between taking their American-born children with them to countries they've never known or leaving them behind in the U.S. The psychological impact on children is immeasurable, as some may wake up to find their parents gone with no explanation. Schools are already preparing for the fallout, with teachers and counselors bracing for traumatized students left behind. Legal experts warn that due process could be overlooked in the rush to meet deportation targets, leading to wrongful detentions. With fear gripping entire communities, one question remains: how far will this crackdown go? Jason Gonzalez, an immigrant from Venezuela, is one of many who fears what's coming. He arrived in New York City with his wife and 3 children in October and has been living in city shelters ever since. His biggest fear? That ICE could raid shelters, rounding up families who have nowhere else to go. We were very afraid because these are federal lands where we fear that with President Trump's return to the presidency, we could witness raids here, he said. Many migrants share his concerns, preparing themselves for a future filled with uncertainty. So, how exactly is New York City preparing? For the past 2 months, officials have been working behind the scenes, training city employees and launching an education campaign for immigrants. The city has printed pamphlets in multiple languages, informing undocumented residents of their rights and what to do if ICE knocks on their door. Legal support networks are being strengthened, and officials are encouraging people to have emergency plans in place. Some families are already taking precautions, ensuring that children carry important documents in their backpacks in case they get separated. Community organizations are setting up rapid response teams to monitor raids and provide immediate legal assistance. The Department of Education has reassured parents that schools will remain safe spaces and that no student will be denied access based on immigration status. City leaders are also working to expand access to pro bono lawyers for those facing deportation hearings. Despite these efforts, anxiety is rising as the reality of mass deportations inches closer. City agencies have also ramped up training to ensure workers understand sanctuary city policies and how to handle potential raids. Schools have been instructed to remain safe zones, refusing ICE entry without a proper warrant. Meanwhile, advocacy groups are holding emergency legal workshops to help immigrants fight deportation. Families are staying on high alert, unsure of what each day will bring as the city braces for what's ahead. Councilmember Alexa Avilés, who chairs the Committee on Immigration, has emphasized that while New York has sanctuary city laws, they are not a silver bullet. These laws might slow down the process and ensure due process, but they won't stop federal authorities from carrying out their mission. During a city council hearing, Avilés warned that the city must be clear-eyed about the dangers ahead. New York's schools are also preparing. The Department of Education has reminded all principals that schools are protected spaces and that ICE cannot enter without a warrant. Schools are being positioned as safe havens, and additional training is being provided to staff on how to support immigrant students and their families. But will that be enough to protect children from the emotional trauma of seeing classmates and friends disappear overnight? Meanwhile, at the state level, lawmakers are pushing for the New York For All Act, a bill that would strengthen protections for immigrants by explicitly banning local law enforcement and state agencies from assisting ICE. Similar protections have already been enacted in California, Washington, and Illinois. If passed, this bill could prevent New York from becoming a key player in the mass deportation effort. But time is running out, and advocates worry that if the bill doesn't pass soon, it may be too late to make a difference. Supporters argue that keeping local authorities out of federal immigration enforcement will make communities safer by encouraging immigrants to report crimes without fear of deportation. Opponents, however, claim it could create conflicts between state and federal agencies, complicating law enforcement efforts. Lawmakers are under growing pressure to act quickly as deportation raids become more imminent. If New York fails to implement stronger protections, thousands of families could be at risk of being torn apart. Another crucial measure being discussed is the Dignity Not Detention Act, which would prohibit local jails from contracting with ICE to detain immigrants. Right now, ICE relies on facilities in places like Orange County and Rensselaer to hold immigrants before deportation. These facilities have been criticized for poor conditions, including reports of medical neglect and abuse. If New York bans these contracts, ICE may struggle to find enough detention space to process the sheer number of deportations being planned. Legal representation is also a major focus. Unlike in criminal cases, immigrants facing deportation are not automatically provided a lawyer. Without legal assistance, many are unable to navigate the complex immigration system and are much more likely to be deported. That's why advocates are pushing for the Access to Representation Act. If mass deportations become a reality, New York as we know it may never be the same again. If this breakdown opened your eyes to what's happening, don't miss what comes next. Hit subscribe and turn on the notifications. Stay in the loop as this unfolds, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Is New York doing enough, or is the worst yet to come? Let's talk.